Hey guys, and welcome back to Intoxicated Intellect. I'm Brady, and today with me I have Justin and Ben. Now, Ben, what exactly are we discussing today?
So, today we will be going over setting expectations. Most of this should happen at session 0, but just understand people are mercurial at best. So some of this can and might change as you're going through. Communication is super important when it comes to D&D stuff, especially when it comes to certain touchy subjects. I think the first, before we get too far in this, don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, do all the fun stuff, hit all the buttons, do the things. Let us know what you like, what you don't like.
If you like us, tell us so. If you disagree,
the algorithm too.
Tell us so.
Yeah. But I think the first place to start, or kind of the natural place to start, is going to be, I was thinking kind of doing the how players interact with one another. But why don't we just start with theme, going over your settings, your what allowances you make, what disallowances you make, that kind of
stuff. Yeah, I mean, like, where are you going to be? And it goes into a few things. It's not just setting. It's setting, and theme. It's all of those things. It's time period, time frame. It's fantasy realm, sci-fi realm.
This is something that needs to be established pretty early on in the whole process of a D&D campaign, simply because as a DM, you're going to need time to write the theme of this plot that your players are going to play through. Because if you're planning on making a sci-fi campaign, you're like, hey guys, campaign for D&D, and your players automatically assume, fantasy, old-timey,
magic caster type deal.
And then you throw them into Star Wars.
Alien or Star Wars.
It doesn't really fit.
Right, and there's, bringing a character into the wrong place and wrong time. It's not fun. It's not like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, where Billy the Kid has a fun time at a 1980s California mall. It's just out of place. An anime protagonist in a medieval fantasy setting needs a reskin.
Yeah.
At the very least. A sci-fi medical officer in an anime setting needs less of a reskin, per se. It's fine. Like, what
Ichigo going to Samurai Japan doesn't really need a reskin, but if you send
Naruto to Dead Space,
yeah,
you're trying to tell a story. It's a collaborative storytelling session with rules that are there, but they're subjective, interpretive rules. And that's the gameplay aspect of it. But it's really about telling that story. And if there's something that doesn't belong, it breaks the immersion. It shatters it. I won't mention anything, but when we started playing the Star Wars RPG, you told me about the first time you had run it. Everyone was in there with the theme except one person. It was very, very different then. It was just very out there. And, just almost caricature, of a character that didn't even belong in that. It was not anywhere close.
I do want to point out, while that stuff, and if that's something you as a DM are cool with, or you have a character or a player that wants to do something kind of like really funny and out there and different, work with them to make it happen. That was like something that I had made my mistake on. I didn't go over before. It's like, hey guys, I want this to be a little bit, I'm cool with messing around, having a little fun here and there, but I want it to be mostly serious. Not setting that expectation kind of led to that.
I think that's a good thing too. Mood goes into setting as well. Serious, lighthearted, whimsical, wacky, or just really dour, kind of gritty. It could go either way, and something that's out of place will really stick out. I think derail. I think really get everyone off track.
Well, then let me kind of follow that up then a little bit. Okay, so we've talked about theme, setting, time frame, that kind of stuff. Say you have a character that really wants to play gunslinger, or a character that really wants to play like an artificer, or certain things like that, and it just doesn't fit into your setting. So like you're running like a pretty low magic setting and they want to be a wizard, or you're running a really like bare bones, no technological advance. I want to be an artificer with a gun because memes. So how do you go about? How would you guys go about working with that, or would you? Do you think it's better to just be like, no, that doesn't fit my campaign setting. Make something different.
There's definitely always a time and a place for like, hey, no, this doesn't fit in the campaign. But before you ever get to that point, I think you do need to at least try to work with your players to an extent. So I'll go with the artificer reference you made. Say they want to play a gun-toting artificer, but guns don't exist in the world that you made. How can you transfer that over to crossbows and say maybe you make a repeating crossbow or other types of that use the materials and the technology that's in the setting, but adapt it to the kind of character they want to make? And if you can't agree in something along the middle ground, then that's where the tougher conversation of, hey, I don't think this will fit at all into the campaign takes place. But I do think it's important that the players and the DM need to always at least try to make it work first, before like a hard no is ever mentioned.
I agree that compromise should be pursued first and foremost. In most situations, people like to say no compromises, but it's cases like this where you're a little out of your comfort zone. Maybe they are too, but you're meeting in a place where still play. As long as the other players at the table are okay with it, and it's all going to be discussed in one session. But I see no reason not to try and talk it out, try and work something in for, your example of repeating crossbow, or just some slight augmentations. It is important to remember, though, that as the one running the session, DM has final say.
Yeah.
And you could choose to not play, but why not just give a little bit of what you want to do? Yeah, why not just give a little bit of what you want to do? Augment your character a little bit. It's not set in stone. You haven't started playing yet if you're in session 0. Why not just give a little and get to do most of what you want to do?
Now, what about characters who, like, you're running a low magic setting, like a more realistic medieval, like it's going to be mostly like fighting. It's going to be mostly like martial style. But you have a character that really wants to be a wizard, sorcerer, or something like that. How would you? Is that something that you would try to work with them on, or is that something where you go, look, man, it really doesn't work here?
I mean,
not in a legal magic setting, a low magic.
Go for it, Justin.
Yeah, I'll make it real quick on my end. Sometimes, if you're writing a campaign where it is supposed to be realistic, it is supposed to be medieval, and if magic is just non-existent in the world you're creating, I mean, that's the thing too. Like, you're fully entitled to that. And let me tell you, as a player, they piss you off, the class restrictions. But if you really want to play a specific class, there are other games. But if you really want a game that's sitting right in front of you, why not try a new class and expand your horizons? I think class restrictions in certain campaign settings are entirely valid. Brady, what do you think?
It's hard for me because at one point you think of it or at least I do think of it very similarly to the artificer situation in a low technology setting. But even then, you can make reason for your artificer to be the one making these discoveries, and eventually at a higher level they get to where they want. But with a low magic setting, it's really hard if they want to be a magic caster. The only compromise I could think of is, at least with the wizard class itself for the spellcasters in a low magic setting, is maybe they get all their wizard abilities and whatnot, but the spells that they learn, they'll still get all their higher level slots and everything, but say they can only ever find even traces of max 3rd level spells late on in the campaign. So where they have access eventually and throughout the campaign of low-level magic spells, but the ones that scale so they can extend use their higher-level slots at higher levels. But it's really hard to make a magic user fit in a non-magic world. But there are ways to do it.
As always, I'm going to come to the support of the bard. And I think that certain spells are okay, especially in the bard scope of playing an instrument, playing a song to try and charm somebody. I think that there's a certain aspect of that interpersonal relationship magic that is still kind of viable in a low magic setting. Playing a song to get someone in a better mood is sometimes nothing short of magic in its own way.
Now, just a secondary question that's not super involved in this, and something I want to pose to the audience as well. Does restriction make you more or less creative?
More.
Oh.
You gotta think outside the box. You gotta escape what you're comfortable with. I mean, if you ever only play D&D for sorcerer, you're gonna be
the MacGyver principle. If you are more limited, you have to be a little bit innovative with what you do. And I like being restricted in as much as you have to try and learn. If this character, if this class of violence, I want to learn more. That is a great question. I generally do think that it inspires innovation. But I also don't think that that's a 100% constant. Sometimes Sometimes if you're not in the right mindset, or if you don't have the proper tools, be that metaphysically or actually physically, sometimes there's just nothing to do to bridge that gap.
Fair enough. I personally, just so I'm not just the one asking questions. I do like restrictions when it comes to things because it does it force you to think outside the bottom a little bit. Force you to be a little Taco Bell about it. And I'm very curious. If you guys in the audience have opinions on it, I want to hear it. Do you like?
I would love to hear that.
Characters or not? Just as a general discussion point, I find it interesting.
Have you had any experiences where you've compromised with the DM like we've asked,
and then
things have gone better?
Came up or didn't?
Work out. You've liked what you've learned. Just tell us a story. I'd love to see it.
We want to know your experiences.
Why we do what we do. Now, we're kind of getting onto characters and all that. So, all right, let's talk character interactions. So, one of the things, if you ever read through the Reddit RPG horror stories and all that, you occasionally get more than occasionally in that particular subreddit, you do occasionally get instances where you have a player who I roll persuasion, natural 20, you have to believe me, or you get the DM who, as an NPC, goes, absolutely not. I don't care if you rolled a nat 20. I don't care if you rolled a 45 on your perception. You don't see this.
So I love those moments in the campaign, Brady, where you do that. Someone thinks that you're just like, nah, I still don't.
It comes down to
because very clearly it can work, but also at the same time, let's just go player to player interactions. Why don't we start there and then we'll hit NPCs here in a little bit?
Yeah. Let's go between people.
That'll
interactions between characters. Someone's trying to convince someone of something, or trying to lie to them, or what have you. What do you think is the best way to go about that? Contested roles? Do you think it's fair for a PC to be able to tell another PC that they have to believe something?
So a very common one that'll come up is a player trying to lie to another player about a small detail or whatever. That, at least from what I found out, it's best to have the one trying to lie make a deception check, and the one being told the statement or the lie or whatever it may be to make an insight check. And if the insight check beats the deception check, then that's that, or vice versa. So at least non-combat PvP in that aspect can be fun. Because then the players also have to roleplay what they know versus what their characters know.
Cue the Avalanche flashback.
Yeah.
Where Arjun said he had a plan, and I absolutely believed him.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I had to play it that way.
Yeah.
Like I was just there.
A secondary question then to you, Brady, since you brought up that point of the lying. Say that character doesn't want to make that role, but their character is in general like, nah, it's probably some bullshit. They don't have any confirmation on that because they didn't make a roll.
I would ask them what their passive insight is, because that is a stat they have. And
I'll put it, my personal point, just so you understand why I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
I don't like having PCs be able to control the thought of other PCs. They're the player characters for a reason.
No,
same reason like where like
you don't play someone else's
really high
character.
Persuasion, or
right.
An NPC that like, hey, this isn't going to happen. Their entire job is not to let you through this gate. You cannot convince them to let you through this gate. That's just not going to happen. They can work around it, but so for instances like when someone's telling a lie, say you have a character who like Burry's fairly suspicious of people, right? Instead of making a perception check against or an insight check against another member of the party, Burry is in general just going to be. You could be telling the truth. You could be lying. Burry doesn't know. He just doesn't.
Disinclined to believe. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's a great point, because that's exactly, and that comes with establishing a character and role playing a character well. And at that point, then it falls into natural behavior for what that character has been known to do, and yeah, that moves on with how that character would normally act. So like Burry being told some BS by somebody with a 50,000 persuasion roll would still be like, I really don't know. And so it does come down to also how has that character been established up until that point.
And the roles factor into it too. Tarkal is not the most wise and not the most intelligent. And when it came down to, like, you have a plan, right? Tell me you have a plan. You really have a plan? He says, yes. I mean, he did have a plan. Wasn't very good. He wasn't going to tell me about it.
He had a plan.
But, the me want to run. And Tarkal's like, well, he sounds like he has a plan. I know this guy makes fire spells, and this is snow, and I'm just generally inclined to trust people. That's just how Tark playing it like that. Boy, that was scary. I don't think that you should be able to command someone that. I don't think it falls on the player to do that. I think that is why the DM exists as an intermediary between player interactions. Why the DM can dictate something like make an opposed check. What's your passive wisdom? What's your modifier here? So that they, in a sense, disconnect the character from the players who are having their own interpersonal relation there, and their own interaction. The DM steps back and is the mediator of that by way of numbers. And that relates to the characters, not the players themselves. It does no player, I will agree with you, no player should ever say, it's a natural 20, you believe it.
Skill checks do not have crits. Crits are for combat purposes only. While a natural 20, will let you succeed most of the time. It is most, not always.
The DM is like the law. The DM exists in order to enforce the contracts we make with each other.
Don't be a toxic DM. Don't be a dictator.
Yes.
Also that, yeah. Okay, well then how about that? Turning it around.
Let's go into the next section.
Yeah, NPCs. What about a NPC trying to convince the party of something? Is that something that you would be like, okay, this NPC is going to roll persuasion against the party to try to get them to believe this? Or is that something that you're just going to talk, and if the party tries to call you for an insight, then you let them roll?
It's more that second thing.
The second one.
Let the NPC speak.
I could see Brady's eyes light up when you got to the second one,
Like, it's just so much easier that way, because at that point, especially like I don't know about you, Ben, but me as a DM, when I get rolling on an NPC's dialogue, especially because 97% of my NPC dialogue is just made up on the fly, it just starts becoming natural. So at some point, if you guys want to call insight check or whatever, then it makes me sit back and go, all right, yeah, let's see how much bullshit this guy was actually shooting, and like, or whatever NPC they might be telling you, and then I'll already have in my mind, yeah, is this a lie? Are they being honest? Is this in the best interest of the party? And then based on that insight roll, you will. Other than that, if you guys don't ever ask for that check, I leave it up to each and every party member to take away from that conversation what they will.
I
like the little cross.
When we did the Star Wars RPG, I lied to you guys all the time.
Awesome. I believed every bit of it. I was a sage.
I would.
So much for that.
A lot of my
It's okay.
NPCs were full of shit.
Okay, David did a bunch of lying too. It's fine.
Oh yeah, no, it was
We
great.
lied our way and we conned an entire village. Well, we didn't con them. No, we liberated.
Another big part of another.
Victor goes to spoils, right?
Yes.
I write the history here, motherfuckers. Let me tell you, I won.
So another huge part of NPC to PC interactions is the attitude of that NPC towards the party. While yes, some NPCs will have a base general attitude predetermined before you guys ever meet them, some NPC attitudes will shift based on how parties interact with them. So like if the party's going to be mean or whatever to an NPC, that NPC is not going to remain nice to the party forever.
Or shifty.
Right, like the NPCs aren't
people that aren't here.
The NPCs are like they still have that character aspect to them. They're not just randos in a video game, which would still be an NPC, but there's active thought behind them, and so they're not just going to sit there and accept you robbing the store blind, and then the next time you come back, they're not going to still be super nice to you. No, they're probably going to call the town guard.
You walk into the store, break every single pot in the room, and then buy from
the NPCs in D&D are actively being programmed at that very moment by a live human to interact with you based on the context of what's happened before, your reputation, whether you're looking at the shiny objects, licking your lips, little things like that, you know? Like, it just...
The NPCs are very dynamic.
Right. That's what you'll get here versus something that's written by some programmers who are, made to write code really fast for big business people that need to make quarterly deadlines. You go to D&D because you want a human.
Andromeda.
you want a human talking back to you as a human would talk. I don't want dialogue options. You know what weird shit I could say. You don't know how I could flub my words. You don't know what kind. Let me tell you this. There is no game, company that could program a Fey deal.
No.
And have it work well. There is nothing, because the wording is going to be so vague. Or a wish spell. Let's talk about a wish spell. The phrasing has to be just so. It can't be too detailed. I want this. It has to be general enough and interpreted by the DM. I love it. I love that there's a human at the helm to have that subjectivity that can break the rules, bend them, and still uphold them and just serve the story like we're all supposed to. I think that that's fleshing out an NPC, and I think that fleshing out your PC to interact like that and to play your character well, but not use that as an excuse to be licking your lips while looking at the shiny objects. And to also know
bullshit.
Like, going back for just a moment to player dynamics, it's to also know kind of like how the characters in your party are going to interact. Maybe it's a little reluctant, but you guys know you're all in a party for the same reason. There should not be any kind of real combat that's going to split anyone apart. So there needs to be a little leeway between you guys too, and that's the kind of leeway that the NPCs can or can't give in this case. Whether it's breaking pots and just being like, "Oh man, they're at it again."
Anyways, do you want to
vandals.
buy this stick?
No, it would be get the hell out of my shop before I call the police on you.
Because that's what a reasonable
Shopkeep would do.
Normal
Engine
alive being would do. Yeah.
My wares!
Exactly.
Wares!
My cabbages!
You just brought back so many memories.
You're welcome.
Flash. So yeah,
okay.
don't be like an oppressive DM, right? Like
No. It really comes down to treat your party like they're your friends, because at the end of the day, most of the time they are.
Hopefully they are, or they will become.
Exactly. And I don't know, I feel if you're being an oppressive DM, like, not to call anybody out because I don't know who this would, but like if you're an oppressive DM, are you okay in the head, and is there something you need to work out in real life? Yeah. Because other than that, why would you actively try to make your party not have fun?
Take your sadism elsewhere.
And actually, that brings up a wonderful segue into our last point. So you mentioned some stuff in real life. So touchy subjects, certain settings, certain interactions, certain things like that are always going to come up.
Certain circumstances, certain motivators.
You're like creepy, what is it, Herbert from Family Guy, the old dude.
Yeah.
There's that, as a character, there is certain set pieces when it comes to like slavery, torture, things like that, or like I was reading an idea on another D&D subreddit about a campaign based off of Goblin Slayer. And for anyone who's ever seen that, the beginning of Goblin Slayer starts off real rough. But
the way you described it, and you didn't even get into it that much, it was about a 30-second snippet, and it was enough for me.
Yep. But just to kind of set the two sides of the argument here, there is that's gonna make people uncomfortable. But at the same time, going back with the Goblin Slayer example, having something like that can very, very quickly set the stakes of, okay, fuck this group in particular, or they are the bad guy, or what have you. If you are a DM or a character, or I should say a player, not a character, if you're a DM or a player who wants to play a campaign that's got touchy subjects in it, if you want your character to have certain biases, racism, that kind of stuff, or if you want a campaign that's got institutions of slavery or torture or sexual assault, that kind of stuff.
Yes.
You get into these kind of topics. What's the best way to approach that? Is it something that's just, if you're playing with your friends, you kind of it's easier to talk about. But if you're, I have this idea and I'm bringing it just to public knowledge, how should you go about setting that kind of stuff up?
Justin, I'm gonna let you go first on this one, just because I need some time to formulate thoughts.
I'll come from a player's perspective here. There is gravitas in real life. There is plenty of gravitas in real life. There's plenty of important things, very bad things that we have to deal with in real life. And there are many cases in which we choose to escape. D&D is a great form of escapism. That's what roleplay is for. You choose your level of escapism. You can choose, just as you could choose your safe word.
That's a fair comparison.
I think that's it. That you can have your limits. It doesn't necessarily need to be out in the open at the beginning. I think the DM needs to be open about what's in the campaign and some of the topics that might be therein that might be problematic. Same way, on the player's side, that if they write something like that into their backstory, I think that needs to be discussed in kind of a respectful way. And avoided because just because you're perceiving something as very evil, and it is very evil, it doesn't necessarily need to be that level of egregious evil for everyone. If there's a level of sensitization that you have that you need to paint them as the most evil people in your head, but your limits are far, far beyond other people's limits, that will pose a problem. And you need to code shift, I think, as a DM, into, alright, they sacked this village. The goblins came in, they sexually assaulted all the men, women, children, dogs, and cats. It doesn't need to be that far. You can just say they came in, they looted, they raided, and they burned the village. And I think that serves the same purpose. I think that is painting them as, look, you've got 3 grades of evil here. You've got lawful, you've got neutral, and you've got chaotic. There are not any gradients in between. You don't need to go to the very, very far end of the most chaotic evil. You don't have to go there in order to paint them as that alignment. I think that there's no reason the DM or a player cannot code shift in order to make it so that it's a comfortable environment for escapism at the table if there are topics that people don't want to approach.
I agree with all of that.
That's what I've got. Yeah. That's what
by the way, I didn't set this question up as like a landmine to like, gotcha or nothing like that. It was just purely this is, like I mentioned earlier, the RPG horror stories. These things happen. And these things happen, but they don't have to.
From a DM standpoint, I think especially if you're playing with a group of people you don't know that well, it's very important to ask very bluntly and very early on, are there any topics you are not okay with being in this campaign? And
I have very specific ideas for this campaign. Is everyone okay with that?
And then even if they say yes then and there, as the campaign progresses and they go, hey, hold on, maybe I don't know if I actually am okay with this, be able to adjust.
It's a caveat if you're too visceral.
Right.
There's always the like I said, safe word.
Yep.
There's a safe word there.
At any point, DM or players can be like, I don't know if I'm okay with this anymore. I don't think this.
There's a line that is there, and if you cross it, you got to be like, okay, walk back.
Yep, and it's very important to be able to recognize those points of crossing that line, and then also being able to speak up, like, hey, this crossed that line. Because I feel a lot of people at a lot of tables won't voice their concerns for being scared of retributions from the rest of the group, whether that's not being treated fairly in game anymore, or just not being updated on when anything is anymore, or other ways of treating that player who spoke up about their concerns in a place where they were supposed to feel okay with doing that, and then turning that back on them. That shouldn't ever be the case. And I feel like that's a big reason that a lot of people don't speak up on why, when a campaign goes on, that they may not be okay with something.
Well, a place for escapism, you should not have to face the things you're trying to escape from. Place yourself to be safe.
Okay, well then, how about this? Let me end on this question then. How do you go about setting up that open communication? If they're like, hey, if you don't like how I'm doing this, or if I as a DM don't like what you're doing, or if another player has issues with another player, those the actual personal dynamics amongst those at the table, how do you set up that kind of free communication of like, hey, we're trying to work together and do these things. We're a bunch of different people from a bunch of different backgrounds. How would you go about setting that up? Or how have you done it, or how would you do it as a player, as a DM.
How do you unify the folk, Brady?
Not even necessarily unify the folk, just give them like a, hey, if something's uncomfortable or if you don't think
how do you get them to talk as players and as characters?
I think you just say it early on, like, hey, if there's anything ever comes up that like you're not okay with, come to me as a DM and like let's talk about it. Or guys, if you're having problems with fellow players at certain times, talk to that player. And players, if someone comes up to you to talk to you about that, don't like take it as personal criticism. Like hear their concerns and then go from there. But like establish early on that you want there to be that open communication and set that expectation for your players that that's okay at any point. And it just allows a baseline of, okay, they said this was okay. And then each player can explore that as they see.
Yeah, there's no reason you can't rewrite the story.
Exactly. The story can always change.
You can always backtrack. If you think you're going to be okay, and it turns out that it's a little more than you bargained for, there should be no punishment from either the DM or the players for pulling back on that. And I think, yeah, Brady, but really just stating that it has to be an open dialogue. Bro, everyone's gathered around to have fun.
Exactly.
The same story together. It shouldn't make people feel bad. We're all here to feel good about our, about hanging out with friends, doing things collectively, imagining ourselves as different, fun characters, and do so much more than we do in regular life. There's no reason to make it just obliquely dark. As far as my answer, I think just not haven't DM'd. Were I to, just like I said, err on the side of caution. You don't have to go that far to paint people as bad guys. You don't have to go into certain circumstances. If you choose not to, you're writing the story. Why do you have to go there?
Right.
People might feel uncomfortable with it. Why even chance it?
Fair.
Ben, do you have anything to leave us off with? Any viewpoints on this or anything like that?
Honestly, I think you guys hit the nail on the head. I do think there is something to be said if, like I said, if the group that you're playing with as a whole is comfortable with it, having something that visceral in a campaign can really set stakes in people in the story.
If there's a group of five, B-movie horror fans that like buckets of gore, and everyone's cool with it, go for it. Have fun. It's just, if there's even one person there that's not comfortable with it, it needs to be talked about. And things need to be dialed back, or maybe it might not be the campaign for them.
Right.
Or, yeah. And that is...
that's, of course, everyone's prerogative. Yeah, everyone has their own choice. I can imagine... I can imagine a Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of escape room scenario with a party of 5 people. It's great, like Dead by Daylight.
It'd be really fun, yeah.
Dead by Daylight one-offs. Why not at that point? And if everyone's comfortable with a certain level of Nightmare on Elm Street, you want Friday the 13th, you want Halloween, or do you want Tremors? Right,
yeah.
At what level are you comfortable? Do you want Evil Dead 1981? Or do you want Evil Dead like 2012? Because there's
they're very different movies.
different levels of plot. Yeah. Totally different. Well, guys, I think I'm going to wrap it up here.
Yeah.
I think we've hit the nail on the head. Is just be respectful human beings, please. Be nice to other people.
And guys, keep being respectful. Feel free to share some stories down here of how you resolve some things, and preferably things that have gone right.
Yeah.
We're not RPG horror stories. You can take that stuff to Reddit. We want to hear about the good stuff that happens. And we look forward to seeing you the next time. Thanks for sticking around.
See you guys.
Comment, subscribe.